Uh, Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for Tuesday, the 11th of October 2022. I've just got to read a notice out to you before we start. Okay, so please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and a copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or raise their hand or chat in the chat functions. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they at least can hear and be heard. Welcome to all committee members, cabinet members and officers, and anyone watching the live broadcast. We do have a fairly large agenda this evening, so we will strive to get through tonight's business in good order. So if I can move on to the first agenda item, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
It was just Councillor Buckley, Chair, who may join us if he's able. Okay,
thank you, Gareth. So next item are the minutes of the previous meeting. Please can we accept these as a true record, or does anybody have anything they'd like to raise? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Sandra. Just a point on minutes 154 about temporary highway licences. And it's not that this wasn't a true record from the meeting, but I'd like it to be noted. There was a question I asked about whether there was any difference in the responses from the public to Barry Island as opposed to the Esplanade in Penarth. And the officer suggested the response had been similar. It subsequently turned out that the responses were far from similar, in that there'd only been one complaint in reference to Barry Island, where there'd been petitions and many complaints regarding Penarth. So I think the minute is obviously incorrect now, and I've shared that with the democratic officer, and perhaps it could be added as a note to this meeting as well, so that we can find a way of putting the record straight. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I don't think we'll be able to amend the published minutes, but yes, from from this meeting's minutes, we can ask all members if they can note that point of clarification as well. So it'll be in this meeting's minutes. But thank you very much for raising that. Okay. Right. Okay. So if we go to agenda item 3, do we have any declarations of interest?
Chair, sorry, I didn't put my hand up, but can I declare an interest on agenda item?
Can you name yourself, please?
Sorry, it's Councillor Julie Aviat.
Thank you.
And I'd like to declare an interest on agenda item 5. As my daughter, it's to do with the Strong Communities Fund. My daughter belongs to Billboard Theatrical Group, and she does a bit of admin as well. So can I just declare that interest, please?
Okay, yes,
thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you. Any other declarations?
Can I clarify, Councillor, that will be staying for that agenda item? Will she stay for the meeting or will she leave?
I think it was already awarded, so this is like...
Right, that's fine then. You can
stay.
Is
that okay?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth, for that, for clarifying that with Julie. Okay. So agenda item 4 is will be presented by Marcus Goldsworthy, and it is a presentation providing an overview of the Cardiff Region City deal. So over to you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. I'll share the presentation on the screen if that's okay with members. It'll help me as well go through it. So if that's
Thank you.
So hopefully everyone can see that now. Yeah. Great. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So in just a starting point on this, there will be references in here, which this presentation has been provided by Cardiff Capital Region, and you'll note there are references to various officers from the Capital Region who have done podcasts. I don't intend playing those, but as members, if you want to listen to them, they off this report, I think you can click on them and listen to those podcasts going forward. So just to let you know. So this is a table of what's going to be covered by this presentation. It's what the city region is, what the city deal is, the targets around that. There are these podcast links I don't intend playing. We also identify the priority sectors and investment portfolios, the coverage map of what's been invested in so far, an overview and roadmap of where the city region intends investing going forwards, and what's planned in 22-23, and then finally a governance map and governance functions, and then some useful links for anyone who wants to look into a bit more detail going forward. I'm sure you all know this, but this is the map of the Cardiff Capital Region and the councils that are involved in it. So it's 10 councils going from Monmouthshire in the east, obviously, to Bridgend and Rhondda and Taff in the west. And we are sat there below Cardiff. It's the city deal is a relatively unique deal in this particular way, because we're across the UK, we're one of the few with as many councils in the city region as this. So 10 councils is a lot. It's intended to unlock £1.2 billion worth of collective investment. It's intended to unlock that investment, most of which has been provided by UK government, although the council itself has provided investment into this. It's designed to accelerate economic growth and productivity through a series of targeted investments in skills, infrastructure and innovation, and in particular in priority industry sectors and businesses. And overall, the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal is governed by the regional cabinet, which consists of the 10 democratically elected leaders of the 10 local authorities. And it's supported by a number of advisory bodies, which are made up of representatives spanning industry, local government, higher education, and the third sector. And we'll cover those later on in the presentation. The regional cabinet is responsible for the decisions of all wider investment fund activity. Jumping on. Sorry, that jumped too quickly. Yeah, there we go. So there we go. So here's the targets that were set as part of the creation of the Cardiff Capital Region. It is to lever in £4 billion of additional private sector investment, seeking to get a 5% increase in GVA across the region, creation of 25,000 new jobs by 2023. That's to be done through £1.23 billion worth of investment, of which £743 million is earmarked for the Metro, South Wales Metro, which leaves £495 million available for the wider investment fund. This is Kelly Burney, who is the Chief Exec of the City Region. I won't play the podcast, but that is Kelly, and you're very welcome to listen to what she's got to say about the Cardiff Capital Region going forward. So I mentioned before there are priority sectors and investment portfolios that the City Region has identified. In particular, these are around a number of areas, but they're not limited to these areas, but they are the key areas that investments have been made in so far. So that's around compound semiconductors, and a large investment was initially made in a factory at the edge of Newport for manufacturing chips. That investment actually has been extremely successful, although the company has fluctuated slightly, but the company is now looking to pay back the investment that was made into the purchase of a building, and essentially that will be money coming back into the Cardiff Capital Region to reinvest in new business. So it's been successful in stimulating business around compound semiconductors. It's also working with fintech, and fintech is the short term for financial technology, and companies around investing in financial technology. Cardiff has become a bit of a hub for that type of business, and so they have been supporting through Cardiff Capital Region financially a number of businesses in that area. Also cyber technology around cyber defence and other areas, medical technology, and the creative economy. So those are the priority sectors that they've identified so far, but there will be others, and I'll come on to that in due course. They've created in Cardiff Capital Region a number of investment portfolios. The first being challenge around new startups and technology firms. Second, around developing skills and making sure that the right skills are available for these businesses that are being focused upon. Thirdly, an infrastructure development pot of money, looking to support the correct infrastructure throughout the region outside of the earmarked fund for the metro. So this is around other parts of infrastructure needed to make sure we develop as a region. And then finally, around innovation and supporting innovation in the region. The innovation program here, this highlights all the various pots of money that are there and how they're being used. So the innovation program is aimed at proposals that have unique intellectual properties, potential for market leadership and significant competitive strengths. It also supports propositions to enhance productivity from the foundational economy and to stimulate and accelerate growth in priority sectors such as cyber, compound, semiconductor, medtech and fintech, which we've talked about. The infrastructure program focuses on public sector-led and private sector co-investments in significant physical digital infrastructure projects. These include transport, broadband, housing, sites and premises proposals. The third fund is the Challenge Fund. It aims to bring together the region's private and public sectors to help develop and deliver novel solutions to societal challenges and provide a route to market for the commercialization of solutions. And finally, the skills programs is focused on both supporting SMEs, so there's a small, medium-sized enterprises, to recruit quality graduate talent, and the creation of collaborative initiatives that support the creation of talent pipelines into priority sectors. So some quite high-level goals there, but those are the areas that are in particular have been focused upon as part of the Cardiff Capital Region. This is a map of the investment portfolio and regional coverage. It's not, I will say that where the little dots are highlighting investments, they're not quite in the right places. But there are, you'll notice with regard to the Vale of Glamorgan, there are a couple around sites and property and also skills. The skills one is in all the council's areas because that opportunity is a region-wide opportunity. There's also an energy symbol for Vale of Glamorgan, which is obviously related to the Aberthorpe Power Station. And finally, the innovation light bulb, which is a region-wide indicator. With regard to the sites and property indicators, that is in relation to some support that's been provided to a business at Nels Point, who's looking to develop a number of restaurants and on the Nels Point toilet block. I won't go into great detail, but that business, when it was first working with the council to bring forward the scheme, obviously had financial backing from the private sector. As soon as the COVID crisis hit, that financial backing was withdrawn. And so they were looking for further support to take forward their project. And we've, through the Cardiff Capital Region, managed to help to provide some of that support. So their Sites and Premises Fund is supporting that business going forward. There is also a support that was provided in relation to Regeneration around some of their work to develop their sites. So the Vale of Glamorgan has seen access to some of those funds to support portfolio developments. And you'll see down the side here how some of the areas that have already been supported, things like ultra low electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging points as well. The Housing Viability Gap Fund, which has been used to promote housing sites, not in the Vale of Glamorgan, I would add, because in most cases there isn't a viability problem in the Vale of Glamorgan, and it's been aimed at some of the more difficult to develop sites in the northern council areas. But I won't go through all of these. There are various opportunities that have been highlighted by the Cardiff Capital Region and developed over the last few years. Again, this is the investment portfolio overview route map, which shows you where what's happened and where these various investments are in terms of a timeline. Aberthorpe is relatively new, as you can see there. Pretty much the majority of the work starting in 2022, but there are others which have been ongoing for some time since the original inception of the Cardiff Capital Region in 2017, including the CSE Foundry, which is around development chips, other medical and pharma intelligence products. And you'll see that there are various schemes which are at different stages of development. Metro Plus is a 5-year program looking to run just beyond 2025, and that started largely around about the end of 2019. So there's a number of various schemes there which are highlighted on a timeline for you to see where they are. In terms of actual commitments and spend, so this was as of the end of March 2022. You'll see there are committed projects and funding, a headline there of £257 million in total in those various pots, of which actual drawdown to that date was nearly 50 million. So they are on target in terms of spending their money and spending UK government's money, and they have been through 2 gateway reviews now around the spending of that money and what they're delivering, and they've received support and agreement that they are achieving the goals they've set out. And again, alongside that, you'll see there is a figure around the number of jobs created and how much match funding has been brought in. That at the moment is probably the weakest area. So if you look at leverage, there's around about £79 million worth of actual leverage, which has come through some of the projects that have been developed, but actually only about £500,000 worth of match funding so far. So that's probably where you would be slightly critical of Cardiff Capital Region so far, although these things do tend to ramp up as the project develops. And then there is a more higher level 22-23 spend profile, again with planned outcomes by the end of 2023. The forecast drawdown is an additional 39 million in 2023, with financial year 2022-23, I should say, with that job figure increasing to 1,341, the leverage increasing to 54 million and the match funding increasing to 11 million. So this year has been going to be quite important for Cardiff Capital Region to show increases in what they're bringing in, if you like, in terms of private sector investment. Again, another podcast. Rhys Thomas is now acting as chief executive, I think, or sorry, I think Rhys is actually the lead financial officer for Cardiff Capital Region. But again, podcast there if you want to listen to what he's got to say. So we're now on to final part of it, which is the governance of Cardiff Capital Region, and you'll see that there is a South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee alongside that. So ignore that for now, and I'll explain a bit more around that. You've had this explained to you before in the past, but it gets quite confusing. So ignore the orange box for now. There has been a regional cabinet associated with Cardiff Capital Region since its inception. That regional cabinet is made up of all the 10 leaders of all the councils. Beneath that regional cabinet is the Regional Economic Growth Partnership, which essentially involves a number of different partners, both councils and outside the councils, and some businesses. There's the Chief Executives Programme Board, which involves all the chief executives from the various councils. There is the Regional Business Council, which essentially involves a number of business partners. I'm not sure who the chair of that is at the moment. It was a gentleman from Cardiff, but I won't give you false information. I'm not sure who that currently is, but that Regional Business Council just provides advice and support to the regional cabinet as and when required. And then as an offshoot of that regional cabinet, obviously, there is the Regional Transport Authority, which is involved in the implementation of the South Wales Metro. And beneath those two, in particular, the Chief Executive Board and the Regional Economic Growth Partnership, is the Investment Panel, which is the ultimate deciding panel on where investments are made by Cardiff Capital Region itself. You'll notice that there's another offshoot box here, which is called CCR, Wider Investment Fund Delegations. These cover areas like the CSC Foundry, which is the factory in Newport, CCR Energy, which is actually essentially Aberthorpe Power Station and the purchase of Aberthorpe Power Station. The Strategic Sites and Premises Advisory Board, which is a board that's been set up to advise on possible investment investments in larger scale sites and premises from the private sector who come to us looking for investment. And then finally, the Challenge Fund Advisory Board, who again will advise and give advice to the investment panel on and the regional cabinet on particular opportunities that come out of that Challenge Fund bidding process. And then alongside that on a dotted line is the Regional Skills Partnership, and then there is a CCR Scrutiny Committee. So you'll notice those feed back into that governance structure. You have then a quick governance functions sheet here, which talks about what the regional cabinet is responsible for, which is responsible for the leadership, vision and strategic direction of Cardiff Capital Region and is the ultimate decision-making body. The Corporate Joint Committee, now I've mentioned that again, this is not yet set up fully, but has been meeting as a shadow organisation because of a requirement by Welsh Government to set up corporate joint committees. I'll explain a little bit more about that afterwards. There is the Regional Transport Authority, which is responsible for coordinating transport planning and investment across the region and advising the Cabinet on the recommended strategies to achieve transport objectives. The Regional Economic Growth Partnership is responsible for advising on matters of economic policy development and providing strategic foresight and leadership. Programme boards, these are made up of the 10 chief executives and responsible for providing local authority perspectives back to Cardiff Capital Region. The investment panels, again, providing advice on city deal investments prior to submission to the Cabinet. Business Council, which again just provides that makes sure that the Cabinet hears the voice of business. The Skills Partnership, which is responsible for identifying regional priorities for skills investments. And then the Scrutiny Board, and this is responsible for monitoring the city deal project activity and for making recommendations to regional cabinet on areas of improvement. A couple of other advisory boards there. I mentioned these: CSE Foundry, the CCR Energy, which is a special purpose vehicle for delivering the Aberthorpe project, site demolition remediation, and then master planning moving forward. The Sites and Premises Board, I talked a little bit about this as well. This has delegated authority for making decisions via the CCR Director and Cabinet members on strategic sites and premises investments. And then the Challenge Fund Board has delegated authority for making decisions via the Director and lead portfolio members on all Challenge Fund investments. So a little bit about the context about corporate joint committees. I said I'd go on to this. They were established in Wales in April 21 to carry out functions on a regional basis. There were 4 created in Wales and they all matched the existing city and growth deal boundaries. They are separate entities in their own right. Their duties commenced on the 30th of June 2022 in respect of the Regional Transport Plan, Strategic Development Plan, which is a planning plan at a higher level than the Local Development Plan, and wider wellbeing duties. In South East Wales, the decision was taken to try and lift and shift the city deal functions and the corporate cabinet and into a corporate joint committee and rationalise the governance so that we didn't have 2 bodies covering the same area and dealing with the same things. But challenges that have arisen from the basically around the way the CJC legislation was written and the fact that the actual CJC isn't a legal entity in its own right. And we have had a number of issues, and these are largely based around the fact that the Cardiff Capital Region has invested considerable sums of money in existing businesses and property and land holdings. And we didn't want to be in a position where if they lifted and shifted the whole Cardiff Capital Region functions into the Corporate Joint Committee, there was a possibility of having to pay things like tax double again. So it would be as if there was a transaction taking place between Cardiff Capital Region and the Corporate Joint Committee. And unfortunately, the way the legislation was written, it hadn't dealt with, and it obviously hadn't foresaw this sort of issue. So we are trying to seek, or Cardiff Capital Region are trying to seek a resolution of these technical matters with both Welsh Government and UK Treasury ministers. And it's as it says here, progress has been extremely slow, and current indications suggest that the autumn of 2022 is when earliest it can be resolved, although I was involved in some discussions around this only a couple of weeks ago, and not much headway was being made. So in the meantime, what Cardiff Capital Region have decided to do is to implement a bare minimum model where we set up the functions of the corporate joint committee, leave them where they are and deal with them at the same time as the Cardiff Capital Region cabinet meets, but that until we can resolve those issues around irrecoverable VAT and other issues of taxation, we're essentially going to carry on running as a bare minimum, a corporate joint committee as a bare minimum function. This has only a limited shelf life, and we need to make sure that these challenges, that this is overcome. What we really don't want to have to do is to unwind the positions that Cardiff Capital Region has got itself into, quite rightly, in terms of intervening in the market. Because of a problem that, if you like, in the way the legislation has been drafted. So we are progressing what is the best option, or the Cardiff Capital Region, I should say, is progressing what's the best option to pursue in getting beyond this point. We haven't yet got, or there hasn't yet been a solution suggested. And then there is a podcast there by Suzanne Chesterton, who has talks a little bit about the roles and responsibilities in the Cardiff Capital Region. This page is just essentially a load of useful links for members if they want to go a little bit further into what the Cardiff Capital Region has done so far and what some of those issues are. So you've got, for example, the main Cardiff Capital Region website, the venture site dealing with skills and talent, Cardiff Capital Region Fund Challenge Fund website. There is the 5-year business plan running to 2026, the current annual business plan, and then a bit more about the prospectus and how the future passenger rail vision for the Metro and the Regional Transport Planning Authority. A couple more documents here. I won't go through them in detail, but if you want to have a look at any of these, they're available for you to look at. And then finally, there's a little bit of a calendar attached here. This ran from the summer of 2022 until the end of the year. You'll see these meetings are happening on a very frequent basis, apart from in August. In October, there's a Challenge Fund Advisory Board, Investment Panel, and a Challenge Fund Strategy Board. Going forward, these meetings are happening, as I say, monthly, with decisions being taken on investments and other items that are coming forward. So that's it, really, in a bit of a nutshell. I'll stop sharing it. I don't know if you've got any questions particularly around it. It was a little bit of a fly through. As I say, that presentation was provided by Cardiff Capital Region to help give a flavour of what they're doing.
Okay, I can only see one person's got their hand up. Oh, two people now. So Councillor Julie Aviett, then Councillor Mark Hooper, then Councillor Anthony Ernest. If you'd like to go ahead, Councillor Aviett.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just explain a little, really quickly, basically, what does this mean for the Vale of Glamorgan? How will anything change? What are we looking for? The transport and for people who are just listening, because it doesn't really mean anything at the moment, until we know what's happening in the Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you.
I think sorry, Chair, I'll come in there really quickly. It's in a nutshell, Vale of Glamorgan will be getting its share of £734 million worth of investment in the regional metro project. There are a number of projects that are highlighted to get investment via that. Some have been slightly delayed by obviously the COVID pandemic and other issues. But for example, the ultimate aim is to have in the first phase a half-hourly Vale coastal service from Bridgend to Cardiff rather than the hourly service that's now currently offered, ultimately with the aim of getting that down to a quarter of an hour service, so 4 trains an hour. There are other options such as the you'll be aware the docks interchange, transport interchange is part of the Metro scheme, so delivering an integrated transport solution at Barry Dock Station. And there are other options that are currently being developed around Penarth in terms of rail solutions. Included in that has been considerable £40 million worth of investment in electric vehicle charging points as well through the Cardiff Capital Region project. I'm not going to list them all off, but you can see that from a transport point of view, there is a considerable amount of investment going on. And then from a sort of a wider, the other pot of money I talked about, which is the 464 million. Let me get the right figure. 495 million, I should say, pot of money. That money has already, a considerable amount of that money is going to be spent to benefit the Vale of Glamorgan. The Cardiff Capital Region is looking to purchase the former Aberthorpe Power Station site and to develop that as an energy and business park. That is an investment when you take the demolition into account of well over £30 million. There have been, there are a number of investments that are going on. I referred to the Sites and Premises Fund. They're looking to support an existing business to develop within Barry. And all the time, there will be businesses coming to Cardiff Capital Region and looking with projects which may or may not be suitable for funding via Cardiff Capital Region. So it's an important fund for the Vale. It's important for businesses in the Vale, both existing and those new businesses that may get set up. We do meet with colleagues in Cardiff Capital Region regularly to talk about what opportunities that are coming our way. And I think without going into too much detail around those projects, you'll see the areas that they're focusing on, and actually quite a few of those areas are really important to the Vale of Glamorgan as well. And we have seen considerable interest in them. I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Marcus. Actually, can I just do a reorder of who's speaking? I didn't have a look in the people function. So, Mark, Councillor Hooper, you come after Charles Champion, and then is Ian Perry, and then you. Is that okay?
Just to say, Chair, I think Councillor Ernest had his hand up as well. Or they couldn't use
yes, I've got him on my list as well.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you. Yes. Yeah. Councillor Champion, if you want to go ahead.
Thanks. I just wonder whether there's a possibility. You've just said not, perhaps, but a possibility that Cardiff, Newport, and then the valleys shout loudest. And I just wonder whether we might be forgotten a bit, but it doesn't sound like it, perhaps. The other thing is Landau Airfield is a very good big site. I don't know whether that ought to be looked at.
Yes, Councillor Champion. I mean, so in respect to your first part of your question, it's what the region has tried to do, and it's very difficult. It's to not be too territorial in terms of how it has invested the money. It's more about the benefit for the wider region than just individual projects or cherry picking individual projects for each council area. But and invariably there is this discussion about what have we got out of it, and I understand that. There is an element that because there has to be generally be unanimity around what happens with the Cardiff Capital Region Fund, that there has been an element that we have looked, colleagues in Cardiff Capital Region have looked to ensure that everyone gets a slice of the pie so that no one is left out. And that includes some of our sort of more disadvantaged valley areas as well. But, the Vale of Glamorgan is really quite an area that has seen quite a lot of interaction with Cardiff Capital Region. We've tried to work quite hard with them on a number of areas. I think that's shown by virtue of the fact that they are willing to invest the amount of money they're talking about in Aberthorpe. So you know, I personally, I don't believe they have forgotten about us. I think we've done pretty well out of some of the investments we've had. They've worked really closely with Aston Martin and Regeneration as well on certain projects. So, you know, they're not really forgetting about the Vale. That might be because we've got some good businesses actually located here, but no, they are, you know, they are looking quite closely at what we're doing. And funding projects, I think, that are important to the Vale, if not in the Vale. So yeah, and then coming to the second part of your question, which was, sorry, what can you remind me what the second part was?
Landau.
Landau, it's a really good question. We've been discussing Landau with the numerous landowners down there, and we continue to do so. One of the issues, obviously, it's in private ownership, and it's a bit like one of these things, you know, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. So we have been speaking to these landowners about the opportunities that the Sites and Premises Fund that Cardiff Capital Region is offering could offer them in terms of improving both the types of businesses they've got there, but also the structures and the facilities and the infrastructure that's there. We have had some interest and we have had some success down there with that, and there is quite a lot of work going on, or certainly planned to go on in the near future around certain parts of the site. But again, it's a bit fragmented, and it's one of these areas that some landowners are not really interested, and other landowners are. But we continue to work with them, and where possible, encourage those to access the businesses that are interested to access those funds which are available. And we do have regular meetings with at least 3 of the major landowners down there in Landau. When I say regular, sort of 6 monthly, that type of thing, and do encourage them to speak to us when they need to. So, you know, we're not forgetting about Landau. It's just one of those difficult sites because it is a bit fragmented.
Councillor Perry, you did have your hand up, but you've taken it down. Did you want to ask a question or no?
Hang on. Yep, sorry. I'll blame the COVID for that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. What I sort of got from reading through it and from listening to it again is it's obviously the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. And I'm always listening out for people, planet. I'm not particularly interested in profit. And we just had a presentation on profit, growth. The word well-being got mentioned at the very end once in the entire presentation. And I'm not sure the Cardiff Capital Region has the well-being or the future of our planet at the heart of its thinking. It's on the periphery as an afterthought. So I'm really concerned by that. You mentioned energy, and there's the little energy mark, which is right on my ward. In the presentation, we got told that was related to the Aberthaw power station. Well, that's a bit of an unfortunate place to mark that. And I'm interested to know if the Cardiff Capital Region is in any way trying to attract all these solar farms that are targeting this part of the way where I am.
Okay, Chair, and Councillor Perry.
I'm assuming that they're subject to the sorry, I've forgotten the name of the act now, but the Future Wellbeing Act, and this is subject to it as well, so that it all has to be taken into consideration when they're proposing anything.
Yes, Chair. I mean, they are subject to that act. They're a public body, as is the Corporate Joint Committee, which will follow on, hopefully, from Cardiff Capital Region. What I would say is, perhaps, Councillor Perry, if you want to read some of the documents that go with that were highlighted in those links, you'll see that actually future of the population and the planet is very much at the heart of what Cardiff Capital Region is trying to do. It is very much trying to act as an ethical investor and encourage ethical investment. In terms of Aberthaw, I don't quite understand why you say it's unfortunate. I mean, just to explain a little bit about the plans for Aberthaw, it is the removal of the old coal-fired power station and to develop a park based around energy and renewable energy technology in a way that's been done elsewhere, particularly in some other countries, but on a very much smaller scale in West Wales, and to look at exploiting new technologies and how those can be used to bring forward, very, very good goals in terms of energy generation for both the Wales and the wider country going forward. So, for example, they're looking at developing a park there. There is the possibility of investing in some tidal power. There's definitely the possibility of looking at how battery storage could go forward. All those things will follow on ultimately from the purchase of the site and to the demolition of the obviously large building that's on there currently, which is the old coal-fired power station. So it's very much at the heart of what Cardiff Capital Region are trying to do. The metro scheme obviously is a project to try and strengthen our transport, which means that you don't have to have private. We have essentially you can use the train, the bus, and the buses more regularly, and don't have to rely on private transport systems. And they've Cardiff Capital Region have invested a lot of money in ultra low vehicle technology, including electric charging points for taxi operators and supporting taxi operators to get into electric vehicles. So, I can't stress enough that it's not about profit. It's certainly not about profit for Cardiff Capital Region. It's about trying to grow how businesses and our residents, the incomes they make, and making the region a more attractive region. But also in doing that, at the very heart of it is that that's done in a way that's not harmful to the planet, encourages green growth, and actually makes a really clear point that this part of Wales is a great place to do business in for those reasons. So, I mean, I would encourage you to read the documentation that comes with the presentation and the links that are there, and you'll see that runs through them.
Yeah. Can I just get
thank you very much.
One piece of
there,
clarification
Marcus.
though on that question.
If I can move on now to
so
Mark
can
Hooper.
I just get one piece of clarification on that very quickly? I did ask specifically.
If it's
really
to the
quick,
point.
yeah. Is the Cardiff Capital Region actively seeking solar energy firms to build solar farms in the Vale of Glamorgan?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcus. If I can now move on to Councillor Hooper, and then we've got Councillor Ernest then. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Marcus, for that. I got a few questions, and you might want to scribble them down as we go. The first thing, when the city deal was announced, the local authorities requested greater autonomy. They requested devolution of business rate income, the ability to levy an infrastructure supplement, option for local authorities to use alternative financial solutions, and removing grant conditions at Welsh Government level to allow pooling of resources. These were key asks of local authorities as part of the city deal. Welcome your thoughts on whether any of those have been done. I think I know the answer, so that's the first question. The second question is relating to where we are currently with these outcomes and benefits, and the relationship between the leverage we're expecting and the amount of money that the public purse is putting in. The relationship that was envisaged was a relationship of something like 3 times as much private investment on top of public investment. As we can see from the figures, we're a long way away from that currently. And the last question, Marcus, and I don't know whether you can answer this, the investment programme for 22-23 is, considerable scale up is an understatement in some ways. This is about moving at a faster scale than they've done so far. And I just wonder what your view with regard to inflation, materials, people, is this realistic? Is this something that is actually under significant threat? And therefore, if it is a significant threat, why aren't we told about it? Thanks, Chair.
Marcus, do you want to answer all these here this evening, or are there bits that you need to go away, get some answers to it, and we can have it sent to the members once you've done that?
I could probably give general answers to Councillor Hooper if that's okay. And if I'm too general, Mark, please come back to me separately. Is that all right? Okay,
thank you.
So in terms of, Councillor Hooper is completely right. When the councils were involved in the first discussions around Cardiff Capital Region, there was a lot of discussion, both actually more with Welsh Government, but with both Welsh Government and UK Government around the autonomy that could be given to the region as a whole. It's fair to say we haven't achieved, or the Cardiff Capital Region hasn't managed yet to convince Welsh Government in particular around some of those areas, although there has been some movement by Welsh Government and it continues to be under discussion, I would say, particularly around things like grants and how those are administered, and can we mix the money that's being made available by Cardiff Capital Region with some of the grant funding so that you create a bigger pot of money which creates bigger leverage to get into to get businesses to come to the region. Those discussions are still going on, and it has happened in some places. I think it's fair to say actually that with the changes that have happened with UK government and perhaps them putting their feet into some of the positions that Welsh Government used to be the only players, UK government, it's very strange, seem unaware of the investment side of UK government, seems very unaware of what the requirements of Cardiff Capital Region are and some of the city deals, and they've been harder to have those discussions with and to try and bring to the table. So that part of it remains a little bit disjointed. I mean, if you wanted to get you a really up-to-date position, Mark, I could probably get that from Kelly Burney. If you don't mind, I'll probably email her after this and ask her to give us a bit more of a feel for where various parts are on that, and we can come back to you. So in terms of then, Councillor Hooper mentioned the leverage and the fact that the figures don't show great leverage in terms of where we are today. And I think what I would say is that I mentioned there have been 2 gateway reviews so far undertaken by auditors for both UK and Welsh Government, looking at how far Cardiff Capital Region has got in terms of the leverage and indeed investment from outside, from business. And they are on, what I can say is they are on track with what was always envisaged. So it was always envisaged it would take some years to set up a number of the structures, a number of the funds and a number of the interventions. And that as time built, those interventions would see both more investment and more private sector investment and leverage coming into the system. So it isn't unusual to see that lower scale at this stage, and they're not in any way, or Cardiff Capital Region are not in any way being singled out for criticism by the auditors in respect of that. They've passed these gateways, they are meeting what they are considered to be their targets. Looking forward to 22-23, I mean, a large part of some of that investment, I would say, is around, for example, Aberthaw. There are other pots in there, and there are other jobs being created. I have not heard that, we are in difficult times, as you've described, and we all know. But I have not heard that those figures set out in that programme are under threat. I can again ask the question because it's a very pertinent question, and perhaps come back to you after the meeting after I've spoken to Cardiff Capital Region. I have no problem in doing that. So I hope that's okay.
Yeah, and if you've got any further points, Mark, or you need a longer answer, please get in touch with Marcus and he'll be able to be delighted to help with all that. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Anthony Ernest, thank you for waiting. If you'd like to go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Marcus. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I've got 4 quick headings, and you may want to give me brief answers to these. The first is the issue of free ports. I'm wondering whether the CCR has looked at the issue of creating a free port in Wales. I understand that quite a number are in the process being set up in England. They're proving to be very successful, bringing a huge amount of investment into the areas. And yet we heard that Welsh Government has not been particularly enthusiastic about a free port within Wales. Now, if there were one to be established, obviously the Cardiff Capital Region would be ideal, could include sort of the likes of Newport, Cardiff and Barry as well as the airport, and that would make a critical mass in which to establish a free port, and I would hope that CCR would be working towards that. Shall I give you the other points and then you can respond to them? Point number 2, we are a scrutiny committee, Marcus, and you skated very quickly over scrutiny by CCR, and I'm just wondering exactly what the CCR process is within Cardiff Capital Region, because there seem so many boards, so many committees that it must be very difficult for anybody, let alone yourself, to keep up with the with what is being discussed. I accept that many of these are in embryonic stage, but nevertheless, perhaps we can hear about that. Point number 3, the metro. This is closer to home because the metro, unfortunately, is not going to improve the rail network into Penarth or to Barry because it's part of the national rail structure. Not the valley. Well, it is part of the Valley's lines, but the trouble is not part of the core Valley's lines. And therefore, we see that the continuance of diesel trains or bi-mode trains, possibly into Penarth and probably Barry as well, is going to carry on. I would have hoped by now that the whole of the Valley's network, to include Penarth, Cogan, Dingle Road, and indeed to the west, my colleagues can speak on that, would have been included, and we would want to see improvements, while quite clearly they're not out there. And lastly, you mentioned a large manufacturing facility in Newport. I'm wondering whether it's Newport Wafer Fab, which the UK government and indeed many other people in the country are concerned about because the potential sale of the company to China through a Dutch intermediary. And there is a lot of concern about that because Newport Wafer Fab is an excellent company. And I feel, it's a personal view, that it should be retained within our area and within the UK. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair and Councillor Ernest, I'll come back on that. So in terms of the Freeport, Cardiff Capital Region has been involved with the various local authorities who've got ports with in them and have been discussing this. So one of the lead authorities in Cardiff Capital Region looking at this was Newport. They were working with ABP at the time because obviously the Barry, Cardiff and Newport ports are ABP ports. At that time, there hadn't been a decision made on whether how Welsh Government were going to work with UK Government around this. Obviously, since that time, you may be aware the prospectus is now out and that there is a process now in train to bid for Freeport, or certainly to put it express an interest in Freeports. What I would say is that Cardiff Capital Region, I should say, have had some discussions with ABP, being the main port operator in the Cardiff Capital Region area. And ABP have essentially put their eggs in a different basket now. They are looking at Port Talbot because it's South Wales' only deep port-to-port with considerable opportunities for expansion. That means that probably it's slightly more complicated in terms of putting any bid forward. That being said, we continue to have discussions with colleagues in Welsh Government and Cardiff Capital Region. From the point of view of the Vale, I think it's fair to say that the airport is probably one of the opportunities that shouldn't be missed, but those discussions are ongoing. In terms of the process for bidding, I think the initial expressions of interest in terms of question asking ended last week, but the process of bidding for one ends in November. We would work with, if that process was going to go forward, we would have to work with both Welsh Government and Cardiff Capital Region to support a bid. I think it's fair to say we'll have to find out from them if they feel it is worth it at this stage. In particular, I know that the Welsh Government are very focused on any Freeport bid, focusing on energy and renewable energy and the impact that a Freeport could have on renewable energy. Hence why the focus has been on Port Talbot because of this deepwater harbour, the Celtic wind opportunities which are currently being consulted on at the moment as well, and the opportunities for manufacture of floating offshore turbines associated with that. So if that is the case, we would be more focused on looking at what business in the Vale of Glamorgan, for example, and the Cardiff Capital Region regionally would benefit from that type of development. But it's something we are considering. It's not, you can probably sense from there have been a lot of discussions that have happened around this, and they are sort of crystallising around that. So I'll sort of leave it there if I can. In terms of scrutiny of Cardiff Capital Region, there are members associated. There is a scrutiny committee that is set up and has been for some time, and members are placed on that scrutiny committee. I'm afraid I can't tell you who those members are, and perhaps I can ask for more information to be presented to this committee about how that scrutiny committee functions. I don't have that information here with me, and I don't have information about who the members are on that, so I could perhaps get that information and get that passed back to you. Likewise with the metro, I think it's fair to say there are considerable improvements associated with the Vale of Glamorgan, wider than just the Valleys line. I think probably at this stage I will ask if I can ask Transport College to come back to you, Councillor, on where the various stages are on Penarth investments. I mentioned the Barry investment. You'll notice that Transport for Wales have purchased a depot in Barry. That is associated with the electrification of the main line, but also with the running of tri-mode trains, which are electric, diesel, and battery. So perhaps if I ask Transport College to give a little bit more information about where we are currently with that stage and come back to you on that. And finally, I can confirm it is not Newport Wafer Fab, who are the company that we've been talking about. I've desperately been trying to search the web because I've forgotten the name of them. They are a manufacturer of chips for mobile phones and another lot of products, but it isn't Newport Wafer Fab, so I can confirm it isn't them who are involved in the discussions.
IQE. Marcus.
IQE. Thank you.
Right. Oh, well done. Yes, good. Thank you very much, Marcus. Excellent. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. I can't see any other people have got their hands up, but that was a really interesting presentation. Thank you for that. Just to tell members, I'm a member of the Scrutiny Committee. I haven't been to my first meeting as yet. It got postponed. So I think I am going later this month to the first one for this term. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And this was well timed, Marcus. Sort of telling me all about so thank you very much. Okay, so we now move on to agenda item 5, which is Stronger Communities Grant Fund. And I think Phil Chappell, are you meant to be presenting that? Good evening, Phil. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. You'll see that there's a report that's been referred from Cabinet, so I'll just give you a bit of a run through now. So a lot of you know Strong Communities Grant Fund was set up 2017, kind of designed to streamline the funding that existed in the council, moving away from that sort of year-on-year funding of running costs of organisations. So it was a different approach. So it pulled together things like the former cash grant and other funds, and it's run by the Regeneration and finance teams at the council. So kind of in the sort of the broad aims of the fund are there to sort of help organisations generate money or save money so that they're less reliant on kind of year-on-year funding, deliver projects that also align with council priorities within the corporate plan, and this can evolve over the time. As you'll see, we've added in things like climate change into the latest iteration of the fund. It's also proven to be quite a useful vehicle for Section 106 in some cases, where we can match a little bit of that with this fund and bring in some other money, and match funding is a big part of it as well. So you'll see from the report that the value of projects is quite a lot higher than the actual fund itself. So we may have had funds like, I think there was one in there for Cowbridge where we were able to fund 25,000 towards 130,000 towards £150,000 project, and those are the projects that generally get looked upon more favourably as well. It changed a little bit towards the end of the last iteration, 2020. We had COVID, and around that time when it struck, 50,000 of the fund was allocated to the Vale Heroes pot to get funding out to groups and organisations, community councils as quickly as possible, really. So I think about 25 projects were funded through that COVID route. So small amounts of money, but funding things like PPE and vehicles and things like that. So it was a useful fund to be able to adapt at short notice. It's decided on by a panel. So the panel's made up of council council staff chaired by the leader or deputy leader. GVS, Glamorgan Voluntary Services, are on there. Waterloo Foundation, a representative from Town Council and a representative from Community Council. So that's decided by, they're nominated by another committee within the council, and they rotate. And also Natural Resources Wales are on the panel. So it's useful having different people from outside the council on the panel, and then sometimes it informs their thinking of funding allocations. And we've got quite close relationships with the National Lottery, so we're able to kind of talk to them about, could we look at 1 year funding from you, or second year funding from another organisation, or in the case of Natural Resources Wales, they've been able to identify money that could fund, a greening element for a project, whereas we might have funded the volunteer support or some tools, that side of things. And at the bottom of your report, there's an Appendix B, which has got all the summary of projects that were funded in the first iteration, so 2017 to 2020. So all projects, regardless of size, this panel recommends approval or rejection, and they go to sign off by cabinet. So there's still that scrutiny by cabinet of the final list. So in 2020, there was a new incarnation of the fund, and the council committed about 837,000 over a 5-year period. Largely the same, so that sort of same principle of what can and can't be funded was remained, but I think they tweaked it to make the maximum grant 25,000. But also we realised that there was, whether you were going for 50,000, 40,000, 25,000, you were still having to fill the form in the same form if you were going for 1,000. So we decided to add in a quicker access, a simpler route for small projects of up to £3,000. They still have to go through the scrutiny process, they still have to go to cabinet, but it means that you're not filling in lengthy paperwork for that fund. And then since that 2020 incarnation was started, there's been 41 projects approved. And those are all summarised in the report in Appendix A that you can see so far funded in this round. We've just closed a round in September, and the interest has been pretty strong. Obviously, the pressures on finances all round are pretty tough, whether you're a village hall trying to heat yourself, or you're trying to maintain staff, or look at projects around cost of living. So I think that's where this fund, being quite flexible and being in line with council priorities, whether it's things like cost of living projects, they can come into the mix now as well. So we had about 75 expressions of interest, and out of those you filter them down. People put in formal applications then, when you don't want people to put in an application unnecessarily if they're not going to be eligible, or we can direct them to another source of funding. So we've had 13 applications in for this latest round for the small pots up to 3k, and 20 larger applications. So as ever, it's oversubscribed. We've got about £325,000 of applications in for the 225,000 we've got remaining this year. But often we're able to kind of divert that. If we can modify the amount we award people during the meeting. So the team, it's going to be delivered again within Regen and Finance, but the new Creative Communities team going forward, because that team will also be responsible for managing and targeting other funds like the UK Government Shared Prosperity Fund, or possibly smaller funds that we look to manage. But the idea is that they will lever in more money, as much money as possible, into communities and businesses in the Vale. So I've rattled right through it there, but all of the projects that have been funded to date there are in the summaries. There should be a picture and a summary of each project. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Phil. That was great. I have got people's I've got their hands up already to ask you questions. I think it looks really interesting. It was interesting to read about all the different people who've bid, and the different communities and stuff like that. So the first person I have is Council Leader Liz Burnett, if you'd like to come in first, and then I've got Councillor Champion and Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll come in as cabinet member. I just wanted to take my hand down while I remember. I just wanted to make a few extra points on this. I mean, this started back in 2016, and it was all based around the direction that we had with Creative Rural Communities around capacity building. And this is capacity building within communities, because we were moving away from a top-down approach to regeneration, or we'd moved away from that. And in the way that Creative Rural Communities did, they actually worked with and in their communities in terms of helping them to develop the capacity, whether that be sort of social capital or human capital or whatever it was, to make things within those communities work. Quite interestingly, that there was a gap in this. Was all EU funding, which is why it's coming to an end. There was a gap at one point of 6 months where a lot of councils got rid of their rural regeneration teams, and we actually kept ours on and repurposed them for about 6 months into working on other projects around the council. And if any are interested, we can provide details of all the things that happened as a result of the intervention of the Creative Rural Communities team going in and helping to unpick things and get stuff to work more effectively. The application process within Creative Rural Communities is almost a mentoring relationship. And so you'll sometimes you'll look at ones, and I've seen ones where people have wanted to do things in terms of an open space within their community, and we can make the connection over the local nature partnership, which might have a grant of £5,000 available, rather than using an application to the council, which then means that they can either apply for something else or someone else can get that money. And it's those links that Phil mentioned, to do with whether it be lottery, whether it be Natural Resources Wales, whether it be Waterloo Foundation, that have all been brought into play to support communities. As I said, Creative Rural Communities is coming to an end, but actually there's been so much learning from that team that it won't stop. I mean, obviously we've got budget pressures next year, but Creative Communities going forwards will actually be working with communities right across the Vale. And so we hope that community capacity building will be actually happening right across, and their expertise will be making a difference among our communities going forward. So as I said, it's worth having a read of the back, the case studies to do with this programme, because for new members to see what can happen in your communities if social and human capital is developed, it is nothing short of stunning with just a very small amount of money. So but I'm sure the team would be only delighted to provide you with additional information should you wish it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So I now have Councillor Champion, if you'd like to ask your question.
CRC office was in Cowbridge and that's disappeared. And now I presume CC is going to be in Barry, is it?
Thank you, Councillor Champion. I suppose we've retreated to a small office at the back of Creative Rural Communities building, but the college there is marketing the main, because we had two entire blocks of flats, so 2 flats there. So we are maintaining a presence in Cowbridge, the Creative Communities team. I'm going to have to get used to saying that. But obviously I want everybody out and about meeting communities as much as possible across the whole Vale. You don't want people based in one office all the time, but there will be desks in Barry for everybody. People will be working at home, but you want people out and about meeting as many community groups as possible. And we've started to do that as well, meeting councillors, talking about community space, and starting to look at doing community mapping in some of the wards. So actually, if you want the team to come out and meet any of you, more than happy to.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. So Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to go next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Phil. Just a quick question of clarification. Waterloo Foundation are obviously a funder as well. I noticed they're on your committee. Do they? Can you explain their role in the committee, and do they actually add funding to some of these grants as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Yeah, they do. I mean, in the first iteration, they funded a top up to the fund, because I suppose they actually have various priorities, worldwide priorities around water, young people, specific health needs. But they also, being a Wales-based charity and a link to Barry, they have an interest in the Vale and in Barry as well. So what we've been able to do with them is they've been able to look at projects and go, actually that one ticks our priorities, and actually we could look at a second year. And if a panel meeting where we're running out of money, they're looking at how we can fund it. And it's also great to have organisations like Natural Resources Wales and Waterloo and the Lottery getting under the skin of what the priorities are in the Vale and what the communities are asking for, so that we can potentially discuss those with them to look at longer term funding or get their advice on what might have been funded in the past. So I'm really grateful that they're on that panel, just because of their knowledge of funding. I mean, it's a really nice panel to be with, actually. So many ideas bounce off them all.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. I can't see anybody else his hand up to ask a question, but thank you very much for that presentation, Phil. We look forward to more reports coming to this committee. I don't think there's any recommendations we need to take forward. Is it just to note, Gareth, the report?
Yeah, I think that's about fair, Chair. Thank you. Just to note the report.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic work. I'll be getting in touch about our community mapping. Okay, thank you. Okay, so agenda item 6 is Vale Glamorgan Council annual performance calendar 22-23, and I believe Tom Bowring is going to present that to us. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. Nice to see everybody. And now for something completely different. This, as you say, is a reference from Cabinet. We're taking this to all scrutiny committees as well as the Governance and Audit Committee, Chair. The report covers a couple of things. Firstly, we were conscious that with a large number of new elected members as part of this cohort, that it might be useful just to set out the overall context that we're working in terms of managing and reporting our corporate performance. And secondly, I was keen just to be able to provide members with some information about how we're getting improving the opportunities for you to get involved in shaping some of these reports before they come to your committees. So the report is primarily for your information and noting, with any comments to be referred back to Cabinet. And what I was going to draw attention to for committees is Appendix A, which just sets out the timetable for the production of these reports throughout the year. We've got a couple of them on your agenda later on today, including the self-assessment report, which Marcus is going to take you through, and the quarterly monitoring that Emma is going to present as well. So really, it's just to show you how across the 12 months, the various different aspects of our performance framework come to committees. And then equally within the appendix, you've got some of the lines which are shaded light blue. They're the informal member workshops. We've held a couple of those so far, one on how to present the annual self-assessment, and the views of those elected members who took part in that workshop have helped shape the presentation Marcus is going to give. And we had a really good session very recently about some ideas on quarterly reporting as well. So you'll see some changes being reflected in the coming months. So that's a really quick overview of the reference, Chair. Or I think you're on mute, Chair.
Thank you. I was just testing everybody. Anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Tom at this point? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that, Tom. I think you just note this report if there's no other recommendations going forward. Okay, so I think we're coming to agenda item 7 and 8, and I'm going to take these two together because obviously they're related. And I think, Tom, it's you again, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Chair. This is, I'm going to be ably assisted by Marcus and Emma if you've got any particularly service-specific questions on this one. But these are some references relating to Project Zero, the Council's Climate Change Challenge Plan. There's a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Committee. In ordinary times, we would have reported to yourself as a committee and to Corporate Performance and Resources prior to Cabinet, just because of the timing and balance of agendas. It hasn't been possible to do it, which is why it's coming to you after going to Cabinet. But any views can obviously go back to Cabinet. So this report was produced in July. As I say, it relates to Project Zero, which is the Council's response to the climate change emergency that was declared in 2019. Also reflects the nature emergency that was latterly declared in 2021. And as committee will be aware, the council's response in the form of the challenge plan is structured around 3 areas: demonstrating strong leadership, so our community leadership role, fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations, so that's in effect the council's enabling and influencing role on the behaviours and choices of our communities, and then finally a section around making a difference now, and that relates to how the council operates as an organisation, how we act as an employer, and how we manage our buildings and our land. The report sets out a series of developments that have been made or that are underway in each of those 3, and they relate to firstly a real stride in terms of how we produce and communicate our work around Project Zero. We've also been working really positively with some community groups across the Vale of Glamorgan, including Lambeth Major, Wenvo and Penarth, which have been really positive and proactive. Work, as the report makes reference to the fact that work had commenced, it's recently concluded on submitting the second round of data to Welsh Government in terms of measuring overall Welsh public sector carbon emissions, and that's a key piece of work in order to provide us with data and intelligence on what we need to target our work on doing. The report also references our partnership working with the Public Services Board. There's a climate change charter that all public sector organisations in the Vale of Glamorgan have signed up to, and we continue to place emphasis on that in the emerging wellbeing plan, which will be out for consultation shortly. The section on fulfilling our responsibility to current and future generations is a really detailed section, Chair. That's because this particular challenge plan spans such a broad range of activity. It encompasses transport, the economy, food, nature, energy, waste, water use, flooding. So there's a significant amount of work underway. But some of the highlights that the report draws out are around the consultation that's going on internally on the green infrastructure plan. I know Marcus has spoken to you as a committee around the review of the local development plan and supplementary planning guidance, and clearly those have a major role to play in tackling climate change. We heard from Marcus earlier as well around the work that the Cardiff Capital Region are doing, and specifically around the Aberthaw site, and that's referenced there as well. We've continued to work in partnership around the arena of food, so looking at sustainable food choices for the Vale of Glamorgan and our residents, as well as promoting active travel and encouraging the use of public transport and electric vehicles. So the report details a series of other internal pieces of work that will have an influence on our communities, including the 10-year waste strategy, which is out for consultation currently. And then finally, the report talks about making a difference now. So really that's how we operate, as I say, as an organisation, and how we manage our services and our assets. For those of you who've been to the civic offices recently, you'll see, for example, the installation of electric vehicle charging points there, and that's also happening at the Alps depot. That's part of encouraging our staff to travel in a more sustainable way. And I mentioned the Welsh Government data return. What that's enabling us to do is really focus in on where within the supply chain our carbon emissions predominantly sit. We know that approximately 80% of the council's carbon emissions are within the supply chain. So clearly we need to do some work in terms of how we decarbonise our activities when they're commissioned. So work is underway in terms of producing a new procurement strategy, which will be consistent with that. Committee will also note that the Council's carbon management plan is due for renewal, and I'll be bringing that to Cabinet in the coming months. That will set out the context for the use of our assets in our decarbonisation strategy. And the report also talks about some of the work that's being done within the Council's housing stock, as well as the developments within schools, both new. The report makes reference to South Point Primary School in Roos being the first zero carbon use in use school in Wales, but also importantly the work that is being done via SALEX funding for existing school buildings. So that's a bit of a summary in terms of the content of the report. As you mentioned, Chair, you do have a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Committee on your agenda this evening as well. That committee, when discussing the report, asked some specific queries about particular schemes. They also made some general comments around improving and enhancing the way that we report progress on Project Zero. So, for example, they were asking for further information on the use of funding and reserves to develop this activity, as well as how we presented the overall picture, including potentially the use of RAG statuses and drawing out risks, issues, slippage and barriers within the report. Those were really helpful suggestions. I discussed them with colleagues at the Project Zero Management Board recently, and with our new programme manager starting next month, I'm looking forward to making those enhancements as well. The final recommendation that they made was that a presentation came to your committee, Chair, with your permission from the Local Nature Partnerships team, and we've tentatively scheduled that to coincide with the next update on Project Zero, which will be coming to you prior to Christmas. And that's a quick whistle-stop tour through the report for you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting report, and seeing what the council's actually doing to sort of get to, you know, sort of Project Zero and stuff like that, and how we're getting along. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask Tom at all? No. I think a question that I had was you talked about sorry, I've written it down and turned the page. Oh, the context of the asset and the decarbonisation policy. When is that report likely to go to Cabinet, and are we likely to see it? When are we likely to see it in scrutiny?
That one will, I understand, Chair, that will be tied up within the corporate asset management plan. That's going to come to Cabinet in December. If it's useful, I can ask colleagues in Property Services to make sure that, as well as a reference to Corporate Performance and Resources Committee, that we also bring that to your committee, given the links to Project Zero.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you, and thank you very much for giving us the whistle-stop tour of that. We really appreciate you bringing that, and I'm sure when the other report comes, we can scrutinise that and ask many more questions on that. So I think that the recommendation. Sorry, I've muted myself. The recommendations, I think we've fulfilled all the stuff on the recommendations for these reports, but thank you very much, and we look forward to getting that other report through. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if we can move to agenda item 9, which is the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment 21 to 22, and I believe that is Marcus who's going to. Yes, lovely. If you'd like to do the presentation on this, please, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. No problem at all. Just for members, what I think I'll do is I will put the presentation up, if that's okay with you, that comes at the end of the report, just to talk about where we've got to with this and explain that. So I think it's clearer for everyone. So I shall just share that now. Oops. Can everyone see that now? Yeah. Okay. Bear with me a second. So this report is a referral from Cabinet of the 8th of September 2022. Committee has asked for its views and recommendations for any changes to the judgments or proposed actions, areas for future focus. As part of the consultation process, these comments will be referred on to Cabinet prior to the self-assessment report being agreed by the Governance and Audit Committee, and then on to forwarded on to the Council meeting in November for final agreement. By way of background, the production of the annual self-assessment report is a new requirement for Welsh local authorities under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which required the Council to keep performance under review and consult on and then publish a report setting out the conclusions of its self-assessment every financial year. In previous years, we have had CCT and best value reviews, and this is now the new ongoing performance assessment for Welsh councils. The process is retrospective, evidence-based assessment, and aims to provide a judgment on how well we are performing in the terms of our service delivery and in the use of our resources. It should also identify what and how we can do better. And the Cabinet endorses the self-assessment details as the basis for the consultation, as it is believed that on balance the annual delivery plan commitments have been met. This slide shows the Council's business planning process and where the annual self-assessment fits into this process. You will see that everything stems from the corporate plan, and you'll recall that this plan has 4 well-being objectives, which is 1, to work with and for our communities, 2, to support learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, 3, to support people at home and in their community, and 4, to respect, enhance and enjoy our environment. On the right, you'll see the business planning timeframe. In the first July-August box, you'll see the end-of-year performance assessment of the annual delivery plan. This committee agreed the 21-22 annual delivery plan at the meeting in July, where the performance was shown as green due to us achieving the majority of what we set out to do in the plan. Oops, sorry. What makes the annual self-assessment different from the annual delivery plan report is that it uses our performance against the annual delivery plan, detailed here at the head of the slide, and other sources detailed below in order to provide an overall judgment of our performance for the year against the corporate plan. You'll see that we have a green rating against the annual delivery plan themes, a good rating for the use of our resources, and a reasonable assurance in terms of governance, risk management, and the effectiveness of our internal controls. We'll go into these in a bit more detail in the slides that follow. Firstly, this slide shows our performance against the annual delivery plan actions and measures in columns 1 and 2 from the left, and columns 3 and measures in columns 1 and 2 from the left, and in the column 3, the 2 combined. Committee previously endorsed these outcomes at its meeting in July 22. The annual delivery plan has 6 themes, and this is our performance against these. Though we are currently analysing the outcome of our public consultation exercise on the annual delivery plan, and these may change in the final report that is due to be considered by Council in November 2022. This shows the outcomes of the Directorate self-assessments. Each director had to measure their service performance for 21-22, looking at these headings through the lens of the 5 ways of working. These are looking to the long term, taking the integrated approach, involving people, collaborating with others, and prevention. The scores you will see here are an average of all the directorate scores that were provided. Each director had a challenge session where they presented their information to cabinet members and the relevant scrutiny chairs and chief executive and another director. This slide details both the internal and external judgment of our governance, risk measures, and internal control effectiveness. And the next two slides detail the areas that are for future focus that resulted from the assessment work. This slide details the council-wide emerging issues, which you can see in front of you. I won't go through them. They're there for you to see. And this slide details emerging issues which are pertinent to this committee. Many of those areas for improvement will already be familiar to you. I draw your attention to a couple of the points, which is one in particular, further reshaping our services in response to the rapidly evolving economic and local government landscape. We all know the challenges we face, and that this is an important part of what we're trying to do. This slide shows our annual delivery plan themes and the questions we'll be posing to our key stakeholders, the public, key partners, local businesses, recognised trade unions and council staff. And that's it. That was a bit of a fly through of the presentation. Bear with me, sorry, I shall stop sharing. I can't.
Thank you, Marcus, for taking us through that. And I think, sort of for people who are new to this, I think that was, sort of a good explanation of showing, what each directorate has to go through and which, how you measure your work and the, sort of the self-assessment of that and who, sort of helps you to come to this conclusions. It isn't something where yourself, Marcus, just sit in a room and decide that you yourself are going to give yourself good or excellent on any of those. It's actually, sort of, it is scrutinised as you're going along. I suppose I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that that it needs to be excellent, but how would a directorate get excellent? Because sort of the work that you have been doing is of a really fantastic standard. So I just wonder how you would get to excellent. Is it something that's difficult to achieve, or?
I think, a lot depends on how we've performed in the year, what we've managed to deliver, the challenges we face. So coming into next year, or this year if you like, we have quite major challenges around cost of living, around the inflationary pressures that are placed on different parts of the business. There's always room for improvement. We all know that, and I think that's why it was very difficult to get excellent constantly. We always recognise we are doing a good job, but we can always do things better. But I think this process, which is a new process, and I think that's what's important for members to understand, is that this is a new process. It's come out of a relatively new piece of legislation from last year. This is our interpretation of how it should be done. So if you like, almost like a 360 assessment of how each of us as directors are doing in our various areas. I think what that does do is overcome that issue, as you've just described, of awarding yourself a nice big green tick, for example, for doing it. Because in many ways, previously, that was largely what happened. You'd assess yourself in terms of how you were doing it. And now we work with our colleague directors, cabinet members, the chief exec, and we go through that process of analysing how well we really have performed against those various targets, and are we achieving. So I think it is a very rounded way of doing it. It is new. This is the first year we've done it. I'm sure it will develop. I don't know if Tom wants to add to that, but I'm sure Tom would say that this is a process which will develop over time. But we feel we've got a really good basis to doing that.
Thank you. Yes, I think I came to a couple of the meeting. It was very interesting, you know, to sort of hear the directors sort of talk about what they've been doing, and to some extent, I suppose it's like all of us, sometimes we forget the really good points that we've done as well, and it's needing to be reminded, well, you actually did this as well. And I think that, you know, sort of the hard work that the directorates have done over the last few years under COVID, and now we're going into something else. I think it's, you know, sort of it's good for us to actually see how you assess yourselves as well. I have got, sorry, I'm talking too much now. I have got Councillor Aviat who'd like to ask a question as well.
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much a question, it's just a comment really, and I'd like to congratulate all, you know, everybody, because it's really it's not saying it's embarrassing, but it's like it's horrible when you got to assess yourself. You know, it's really horrible. And but I think we are really fortunate in the Vale of Glamorgan to have such a dedicated staff, and most of us think along the same lines. You know, we're all looking for the same goal. And yeah, I'd just like to congratulate the staff, but I know it's horrible and intimidating to say what you've done right and what you've done wrong. But I would like to say, give yourselves a pat on the back, because I think you're doing a good job. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Councillor Aviat. I have got Stefan Willem who'd like to ask a question as well. Councillor, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry. Just for sake of clarity here, so this report, does it state that we've actually won the bid?
Sorry, Stefan, I don't know what you're actually referring to.
Well, the whole levelling up, you know, the levelling up bid.
Right, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. I thought, what grant are we bidding for? Sorry, Stefan. Yeah. Yes, Marcus, if you'd like to.
Well,
say what
you had me worried there, Stefan, when you said that. I didn't know what. No, that's fine.
I always have you worried.
You do. So we have got to the point where we've met all the targets for submitting the levelling up bid. We've submitted it. We've got through the gateway approach, and so UK government have accepted it on that basis. We will not know until possibly the autumn statement or beyond as to whether we have been successful. It is important we do know relatively soon, because there is a lot of things happening behind the scenes to try and support this levelling up bid, including getting contracts in place with ABP, and also working really closely with Ocean Water Sports Trust, to name but a few, to bring the bid forward. So, you know, we do hope we will hear really soon. We've got as far as I mean, what I would say to you is we know we've got as far as we can, and we've been successful to this point. We don't know a great deal more, Stefan, until I think that gateway, that autumn budget state.
Thank you. Can I just go through the chair? It's just that on page 9 of the main report, it seemed to suggest that the bid had already been won. That's why I was not clear. On page 9. I'll look it up now.
Just going back to page 9 for you now, Chair. Apologies.
How am I reading this now? Blah, 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 blah. In bold, in fact. Right.
Okay. So that's just to tell. There are two UK government funding streams. There is the levelling up bid, which is a competitive bidding process, which we have successfully submitted. We haven't successfully been awarded that yet.
That's like successfully handing in our homework.
Well, it's a little bit more than that. We've handed in our homework, and we've had the confirmation that the homework that we've put in meets the terms of what it's supposed to be, and that you know, we haven't failed in any area in terms of that submission. That's as far as we've got. We haven't had the grades yet, so so that's where we are with that. But there's also the Shared Prosperity Fund, and the Shared Prosperity Fund is not competitive. That has been awarded on a regional basis, but with each council getting an allocation. In our case, it's nearly 14.03. Sorry, no, it's wrong. It's just over 12 million that we've been awarded. So those are separate. I'm just reading this now. So despite oh, I see. I can see what you're referring to now. That shouldn't say that. So it says we have since been successful in securing. So I think there's been a bit of confusion in the way that's been written. We've been successful in securing the Shared Prosperity Fund, not the levelling up bid. You're right to point that out, Councillor Willem. I shall make sure that's changed. I don't quite understand why that's been written in that way. So I'll make sure that's changed. But it's probably confused. What's confusing is that we've been successful in the Shared Prosperity Fund, but not yet in the levelling up bid. So that should be, there's something missing in that typing. I'll get that changed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willem, for pointing that out. That we're grateful for that. Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? No, so we're happy to note this report. Yes, and thank you very much for your hard work there, Marcus. Okay, so we now have, sorry, bear with me one moment, agenda item 10, which is the Vale of Glamorgan Local Development Plan 2011 to 2026. And Marcus, I believe that you're doing this one as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So just for members' benefit, this report relates to the fourth Local Development Plan Annual Monitoring Report, which assesses the performance of the policies in the plan in achieving the integrated plan objectives, which are set out in the Sustainable Development and Strategic Environment Assessments, and has regard to the monitoring framework that was originally agreed as part of the Local Development Plan being adopted. And that was in 20th of June, on the 20th of June 2017. The format of the annual monitoring report, which is attached as an appendix, is set out in the latest edition of the Local Development Plans Manual, which is a Welsh Government document, and we have to follow that format. And it includes both core and local monitoring objectives, and has a traffic light system set against all of those. The report sets out key achievements and policy targets, which have been largely met by the current LDP, and requires, and also points to areas where there may be further work done. You'll note that the annual monitoring report shows that good progress is being made to implementing the majority of the plan's policy, and that the plan remains sound. And I'll just explain a bit around that afterwards. Accordingly, it is recommended that the AMR is submitted to Welsh Government by the 31st of October and published on the Council's website in accordance with the regulations. So just to explain as well that these annual monitoring reports, as they go through, if there is a major issue in the way the local development plan is being implemented, so for example, if not enough housing is coming forward, or parts of the plan like employment land are not being delivered, that can trigger an early review of the local development plan itself. We've not, as in the Vale of Glamorgan, that's not happened. This review is essentially the last review before, this monitoring report is the last one anyway before we undertake our review. We are, after 4 years, you are duty bound as a council to undertake a review of your local development plan anyway. So we've got through all the previous annual monitoring reports and showing that the plan remains sound. This monitoring report shows the plan still remains sound, but of course we are now going into the work around the replacement local development plan, review of the local development plan, if you like, which is also in accordance with the regulations set out. So it's just to explain a bit behind the process, but essentially this monitoring report shows no major problems or failings with the local development plan in terms of the way it's been implemented to date, and acknowledges that we are going into a review of the local development plan as set out in the legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. I have one councillor wanting to ask a question at the moment. So, Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Marcus. I'm just interested. I noticed Nell's points mentioned in the report, and I just wonder whether you could give us a bit of detail on that, please.
Well, that's really interesting because when the plan was written, it relates back to I assume it's the bit around the fun fair. Is that the bit you're talking about? Yeah. So this and
more broadly, I think that the fun fair and Nell's point were referenced.
And the development Nell's point, yeah. So when the plan was written, in particular regarding the fun fair, the plan came. The fund fair was in the process of being purchased, but hadn't been purchased. So when the policies were drafted, and of course there were proposals to do something different with the fun fair. You may recall, if there was a lot of debate at the time, back in about 2015, 2016, about whether there would be housing built on there, whether there be other forms of entertainment and leisure put on there. So what the council sought to do with the LDP was to ensure that largely as best we can, we could protect large portions of it for the entertainment and leisure going forward. And that's where the references to both the fun fair and Nell's Point are in there. But they were largely overtaken by events because the site was actually purchased in terms of the fun fair by a fun fair operator. In respect of Nell's Point, we've continued to look at how we can take that site forward in accordance with the plan. Back in 2015, we had a hotel operator interested in part of the site. Unfortunately, that fell away due to there being insufficient support to attract them from grants, and actually the size of the hotel operator meant that under subsidy control, we couldn't support them to the level we would have liked to. But we've continued to work with both Cardiff Capital Region, also with developers around bringing that site forward. In particular, we see it as really suitable, for example, for holiday accommodation, hotel accommodation, to increase the number of staying visitors on the island. Obviously, that aspiration has been hit a little bit by COVID because the hotel industry in general and staying accommodation initially was really badly affected. Obviously, the staycation bit came afterwards, and that created a lot of demand. But we continue to have discussions with operators, with businesses around what the future of that will be. And we probably, just to add to that, we probably be using some of the Shared Prosperity Fund to look at developing further plans around both Nell's Point and the island in general, to take it forward in the same way we're looking at a master plan for Barry and an economic master plan for Barry. We've kept the island out of that, but we will be looking to do a smaller version around the island. So just to explain that, if you like, that part of the LDP sort of got overtaken by events when it was produced.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hooper? Fantastic. I haven't got any other questions from anybody else. I suppose the only question that I might have is about the retail outlets and the occupancy rate and stuff like that. Obviously, it has been hit by sort of COVID and different things like that. Are we finding that people are wanting to, occupy them again, or have things changed with more online shopping and things like that? Marcus?
So one of the things we talked about, we've got some new supplementary planning guidance coming through as an interim measure to talk about more flexibility about uses in town centres, and that interim guidance, if you like, is a stopgap between possibly the likely changes to policies that will come in the review of the local development plan. However, the policies I think that are in the current local development plan allow that flexibility. So we have been relatively flexible around our town centres, and that actually has borne fruit, because the vacancy rates right across the Vale are really well below Welsh averages, and indeed UK averages. So we've weathered that storm pretty well. I think that's because we have been pretty flexible around some of the uses we allow there. It's also around, we've got some quite understanding landlords who are not, if you like, large corporate landlords. They've taken a little bit more of an understanding view in terms of how the leases they offer people. But we've got, even in Barry, we've got pretty good, considering, and I won't say they're good generally, but they're good considering the market vacancy rates. So I think that's a combination of things, but certainly the flexibility we've applied to the planning process has helped.
Yes, thank you. That was quite interesting, you know, sort of, and the flexibility that, you know, that you have around what can be in the different shopping areas and things like that. And I also think the sort of like the money that the Vale's invested in, you know, sort of like stuff in the streets and things like that has really made a difference in the towns, and trying to link good sheds with high street and stuff. And to be honest, I went into Queen Street, Cardiff for the first time in ages, and I was shocked the number of actual retail outlets that were closed in the main shopping area of, you know, sort of the capital city. So yes, coming back to Barry, it was considerably less in Barry than, you know, the big gaping holes that they've got within, you know, what is a capital city. But yes, thank you for that answer. So I think with this, I think we just to sort of note and consider the report and stuff like that, which is I think what we've done. I've got oh, Gareth, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Chair, we probably need to accept the contents of the report before it goes to Cabinet, if members are happy to second that and
yes,
vote on it.
Yes, I've got lots of people raising their hands that are happy to accept the recommendation that goes back to Cabinet. So thank you very much. Thank you, Gareth. Okay, so now we're going on to agenda item 11. Thank you, Marcus, as well. Agenda item 11. Now we've got 3 reports coming, and they're all going to be presented by Matthew. If Matthew, are you there? Yes. Okay. Hi, Matthew. Thank you for waiting for so long. So if you'd like to take us through, you can do it one at a time if you like, or if you want to do revenue and capital and then do the other one and see if there's any questions. It's entirely up to you. But if you want to take us through 11, 12 and 13. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll take them through one at a time and then see if there's questions after each one. So the first report is the revenue closure of accounts report for last financial year, for 21-22. Just a couple of recommendations to the report. So the first one is the report and the financial measures taken be noted. And then the second recommendation is that the final amended 21-22 budget is noted as well, and that's shown in Appendix 1. So a brief overview. So there's executive summary to the report. So overall for the council, the revenue year-end position was an adverse variance of 13,000. However, that was after transferring just over £18 million into our financial reserves. And there's a table within the report right towards the end, I think. So yeah, so paragraph 2.36. So the table there showing the movement in our reserves. So an increase from 91.6 million to just under 110 million. So you know, quite a positive result. Obviously, increasing the level of our reserves. One of the big reasons for that is the amount of funding that came through in the form of grant funding for COVID and recovery from COVID as well. So some of that is still continuing, but not a lot. So last financial year, I think we had close to just over 15 million in the way of funding for COVID from the hardship grant. A lot of that has now stopped. So we have set up a COVID reserve to fund, you know, ongoing pressures around COVID. However, a lot of those pressures have reduced. So there's a table in the report in paragraph 2.6, which shows the outturn for the services within this committee. So the outturn was a favourable variance of 21,000. However, that was after transferring funding in from our reserves. So we did raise it throughout last financial year that services within this committee were under pressure, under budgetary pressure. So we did have to transfer money in from our reserves, and there's tables in the report showing what we transferred money in for. So then the report goes on to mention the sort of main variances within our budgets in each areas as well. And also just to mention, we were expecting to draw down 1.5 million of reserves to support the neighbourhood services budget. However, again, we did receive additional Welsh Government funding late in the year. So we used that instead to support the neighbourhood services budget rather than use our reserves. So again, maintaining our reserves. The report then goes on to look at, as I mentioned, the reserves that the council holds, and there's an appendix, should be appendix 3. I think the report says appendix 4. Appendix 3 to the report shows a breakdown of all our reserves in a bit more detail. And then also right at the end of the report then, appendix 2 shows our efficiency targets. So for this committee, the efficiency targets for last year were 162,000. However, we only achieved 89,000 of that. So those savings have been brought forward to this year now, to 22-23. So the service areas are working on achieving those savings in this year instead. So that's just a quick overview. So I'll take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Matthew.
Okay,
I've got Councillor Mark Hooper who'd like to ask a question.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matthew, for that. I'm making the point that I made at the last meeting again with these efficiency savings, and we're seeing a transfer of savings that are not being achieved into this financial year. I don't expect there to be an answer, but to make a point that this is not particularly a good way of managing resources. If we're going to have savings, they need to be identified, in my view, and they need to be deliverable as well, because this is essentially a promise, on a whim, which is concerning. And there's no detail behind that. They're unidentified, as you say. So it's I'm making a point, and we'll be very boring, and we'll make this point, I'm sure, every other meeting.
Yes, I share your concern, obviously. Often we do put savings forward, and then they may take longer than we initially expected for those savings to come in. However, we do have areas where we are looking at making those savings in this financial year instead, and we're pursuing those. So we'll obviously report back in due course, and hopefully those savings will be met. Okay, thank you.
Could I ask if this savings are sort of identified in a particular area that is done at the beginning of a financial year that you want to make those savings? So there's no account for what will happen over that financial year in that particular area, that there could be more demand or other unexpected costs that arise?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So sometimes we may propose to make savings in a certain area, but when it's looked at in more detail, or as you say, demand may increase beyond what was expected, or we may actually think, we may look at other areas instead to make that savings and then transfer it to another area. So yeah, we do, and it is quite a short time scale often with the annual budgetary cycle. By the time we find out what funding we've got from Welsh Government, then coming up with a balanced budget, some of those savings ideas, you're almost guessing sometimes at what level of it is an estimate often, what level of savings can be made, and then as has points being made. Either there's other pressures which mean they can't be made, or delays, because some of these savings are quite large changes, and we'll see them even more over the next couple of years. And they will take, you know, an amount of years to come forward. So it is difficult to track them in you know, in the time scale. But yeah, you know, we're obviously committed to those savings, and they're taken out of our budget. So if we don't find them in one area, we need to try and find them in another area then to balance the budget. Yes. Otherwise, as been said, you know, we will be in a dire situation. But over previous financial years, we have managed our budget pretty well, which is why we have such a high level of reserves, and we have tried to put money away for that rainy day. So yes. And obviously over the next couple of years it is going to be challenging. So no, it is a good point that, you know, efficiency targets, they have to be realistic as well.
Yes. Yes. But it could be an art rather than a science.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that. I haven't got any other questions on those points. If you'd like to go to agenda item 12, the capital closure of accounts 21-22.
So yeah, similar report. So it's the closure of accounts capital. So again, just one recommendation on this one is that committee notes the year-end position. So the total capital expenditure in 21-22 was 66.4 million. So, you know, quite a sizable amount of capital expenditure. And again, there's a table right at the start of the report, so just after paragraph 2.2, which shows the approved programme, which was just under 80 million. And then the actual spend was 66 million. And we've approved slippage of budgets from 21-22 into 22-23 of nearly 11.5 million. So where projects were delayed or can be completed within the financial year, the money has often been slipped into this financial year to complete those schemes. So there's a few schemes mentioned where there's been larger variances within the programme, and they're detailed from paragraph 2.5 to 2.7. So there's only 3 schemes there, and the reasons for the delays have been noted there. So for this committee, the total programme budget was just over 18 million, and the variance against that was 2.6 million. So we underspent that by 2.6 million. But of that 2.6 million, 1.7 million has been slipped into next financial year. The budget's been slipped to use next year. So again, there's the first appendix shows the outturn on each individual capital programme, capital scheme. So there's a big long list of all the capital schemes come under this committee and the outturn against each of those schemes. And then the second appendix 2 shows the slippage of 1.7 million and how that has been added to the 22-23 budget. So the 22-23 budget is, sorry, got it open somewhere. So it was just under 26 million for this committee. So the slippage of 1.7 million, which takes the 22-23 budget up to just under 27.5 million. And again, all the current approved schemes are listed within that appendix. I think that's about it to mention. Yes, yeah. Oh, sorry, no, just to mention, the report also shows the breakdown of how our schemes are funded. So within paragraph 5, there's a table there, and as can be seen from the table, the large majority of our schemes funded either by Welsh Government grant or quite often by Section 106 money and other grants coming into the council. So quite a lot of funding for capital projects, and a lot of that is within schools. Obviously, most members will be aware of the 21st Century Schools programme and the newer schools within the Vale. But yeah, a lot of the funding for the capital programme is through external sources. So just to note that as well. Okay, if there's any questions, again, I'll take those now.
Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matthew. It's interesting to see the amount of times that inflationary pressures have been ascribed in the narrative for problems with some of these schemes. I asked a question at the last committee meeting of one of the officers in terms of whether they thought they had sufficient budget to continue them through this coming year. Given that we all know inflation has actually jumped in the period since these accounts closed, I just wonder what your opinion as an author of the narrative on this as to whether or not you think there's sufficient budgets this year to be able to finish the works we've got, or do we see inflationary pressures creeping into every single bit of narrative that you write? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, what we have done as part of, so every year as part of the budget process, we also ask for capital bids. So each directorate puts in capital bids for future schemes. However, as part of that, we did ask directorates to also highlight if there were any pressures within current budgets, and also for future schemes to build in, or try and build in as much as possible. You know, it is difficult because nobody knows where, you know, it seems like every week there's something different happening at the moment, which is causing inflation to go higher. So yeah, we've asked for sort of contingencies to be built into future schemes. With regard to current programme, I think, you know, normally looking at the size of the budget, so 25 million, we'll probably struggle to get through all that work. Obviously, with the officers, obviously a lot of these schemes take up a lot of officer time, so quite often some of those schemes slip. But a risk obviously is the more they slip, then potentially the more that they could cost in the future. So obviously we're going to try and keep on top of schemes as much as possible, and as soon as we are aware of any inflationary pressures on these schemes, obviously they will be, you know, they are monitored monthly and will report back, and then a decision has to be made at the time, I suppose, on each individual scheme, whether we scale back the scheme, whether we want to proceed with the scheme, possibly invest some of our reserves into the scheme to make sure we can. But I think it's going to be on a scheme by scheme basis whether, you know, whether we have enough to finish that scheme. And as I said, obviously, there's different options with each scheme as to if we do scale back or proceed with what was originally planned. So sorry, it's a bit of a vague answer, but yeah, okay.
Thank you, Matthew. I've got the council leader, Councillor Burnett, who'd like to come in as cabinet member for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to I suppose support Matt's comments on. I mean, this is just shifting sands that we're on. I mean, we don't know what's coming out of Westminster, so therefore Welsh Government don't know what's coming out of Westminster. We are delivering the programme as best we can, but with the levels of inflation that we're facing, along with supply chain issues, etc., quite often we tender for a piece of work. It comes back in by the time we've done the legals and checking. The contractor can't deliver to that price. So we either have to value engineer or we have to go back out to tender. That's something that's not unique to us. We're very, very lucky that we delivered most of our Band B programme, schools programme, at the start of Band B, where we were able to get stocks in, we were able, you know, and actually get ahead of the game while children were out of school over the pandemic. But what I would suggest is having a look at the cabinet agenda, last cabinet agenda. I think it was the 6th of October, and on that there was the draft capital strategy. We haven't normally done a capital strategy. We've done a financial strategy and medium-term financial plan, and that's in there as well. But we've actually looked at the draft capital strategy, and that spells out a lot of the issues that we're facing. And we are going to have to be flexible. We are going to have to monitor the capital budget month by month, probably week by week as we go forward, in terms of what we can achieve, what we can't achieve. And I can't say to you, you know, absolutely everything that's in there is going to be achieved, because either with slippage or with funding pressures, it might not be the case. But we will make sure that we report that back regularly and at every opportunity to members. And obviously you'll be very, very involved in the budget setting process in the next few months. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Thank you. Councillor Hooper, yes, if you'd like to ask another question, yes.
Thanks, Chair. And just for Liz, actually, I think, is this, I agree with you entirely. Oh, Mark, you've frozen. Am I still frozen? No, you're okay now. We missed, if you carried on speaking, we missed a bit. You just said this is for Liz, and then we didn't really hear anything. So yeah, I just want to reference the point that Liz was making then in terms of where we are, and I accept where the people we also need to keep informed. I would just add the general public in this as well. I think communication is probably the most key thing, because I think everybody understands where we are with inflation at the moment. And I think that's probably one of the most important aspects of things at the moment.
Thanks. I totally agree. I think at the moment an awful lot of this is in the too big box. And if you talk, I mean, I think it's in the too big box for a lot of us. But it's if you talk to members of the public about the funding gap we're currently looking at for next year, then an awful lot of people will not even be able to contemplate what that means. So we are going to have to do an awful lot more. I've got 2 interviews lined up this week where we're going to try and help people to understand where we're coming from, help them to understand what our priorities will be, help them to understand, as in this case with a capital programme, what will be our priorities, and our priorities will always be the most vulnerable members of our society.
Thank you. So I can't see any other questions for this report. Are we happy to note the report? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Ernest. Thank you, Councillor Champion. Okay, so Matthew, your last report is the revenue monitoring for the period 1st of April to the 31st of August. Okay, if you'd like to go ahead with that one, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So yes, the last report then is looking at the current financial year and providing updates on the revenue budget for this year. So again, recommendation of the position is noted. And also note the arrangements to offset the emerging overspends that we're seeing within this financial year. So again, as we've just alluded to, pressures within the budgets for this financial year. A lot of them relate to cost of living pressures, so energy costs, recent recent pay award proposal, which is still being discussed with the unions. That was greater than we budgeted for. General inflation, such as within fuel, materials, school transport, a lot of areas where we're seeing pressures on the budget. So the report, so I should explain, the report covers all the areas within the council. So the same report goes to all committees, so that the full picture can be seen by each committee. And again, there's a table within the report showing the budgetary position. So the moment we're showing an outturn on budget. However, within that, we are planning to use a fair amount of reserves. And again, there's a table towards the end. Sorry, yeah, paragraph 2.49, so table 5, shows that we're planning on using over £50 million of reserves. So some of that is for things that were planned, so the housing revenue account. So a lot of that is to spend on capital expenditure for the housing revenue account, and also our own capital programme. So we're using reserves for our own capital programme. So a lot of that was planned expenditure. However, there's unplanned use of reserves of about 6.7 million to try and offset some of these emerging pressures. So the areas within this committee, so I'll just quickly run through those. So environment and housing. So environment and housing and neighbourhood services are projected an overspend of 1.3 million. So around 500,000 of that is due to the enhanced pay award proposal. So that's over and above what we included in our budget. We included 3%, but the current proposal is more around 7%. So that's costing around an additional 500,000 just for neighbourhood services and transport. We've also seen pressure on the budgets as we've given an additional payment to a lot of all our refuse drivers. So they've been given an additional grade in order to maintain our workforce of waste drivers. So that's cost around 300,000, and we've also got pressure around 500,000 on the budget because we're still supporting our leisure centre provider from COVID. So we're still they're still recovering, and numbers are still going back up, customer numbers. So we're still supporting them. That's cost us around 500,000 this year. However, that support is due to end at the end of the calendar year. So some pressures within neighbourhood services and transport, also pressures within building services, which comes under this committee. Again, building maintenance and building cleaning services. They're heavily employee based, so a lot of employee costs. So again, the pay award has affected those services. So a lot of the services are provided to other parts of the council. So building cleaning, for instance, the schools are the main customer. So a lot of the charges we levy on the school are decided at the start of the year, and they're agreed at the start of the year. So that was obviously prior to knowing about the increased pay offer. So we're looking at a possible deficit of around 150,000 in building services. However, again, we have got a financial reserve which we propose using to support that this financial year. And then the other two areas within this committee are Marcus's, so regeneration and development management. And again, they're seeing only slight pressures due to the increased pay award. So 64,000 in regeneration and 42,000 in development management. But they're going to be offset by an underspend within our corporate policy budget. So we allowed for that. As I mentioned earlier, there's a table on financial reserves, table 5, and there's also then a section on treasury management, so how we invest our money within the council, and borrowing we have within the council as well. So there's a couple of tables showing the total borrowing that the council has taken out, and also how we invest funds. So they're table 6 and 7 to the report. And yeah, that's it. So again, I'll take any questions. Anyone has any?
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, and then I've got Councillor Julie Aviett, and then Councillor Champion.
Yes, thank you very much for an excellent report, all excellent reports. Could I refer you page 9 of your report, 2.24, under leisure, and you referred to this in your address to us, the deficit of £500,000 in the leisure budget, more particularly, I suppose, through the leisure centres in particular. One of the reasons that the council effectively devolved direct control of the leisure centres going back to 2012 or thereabouts was because we as a council were losing money on the service, and at that time it was of the order of 100,000, 120,000. But now we hear that figure, since Parkwood Leisure have taken on the services, risen up to 500,000. It's very worrying that leisure centres are a facility that are used greatly by many of the people living in the Vale, but we're having to meet this substantial deficit. And I'm just wondering whether you'd care to comment on why that figure is so high. I do accept, of course, that during the COVID period, there's had to be payments made to help cover the deficit, but it's still a very high figure in the context of your report. Thank you.
Chair, can I interject there, please? Gareth. Chair, can I
Sorry,
interject?
yes, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Ernest, but that comes in the remit of the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee. So the question needs to be posed to that committee, not this committee. Sorry, Chair.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yes, I suppose, Councillor Ernest, you can ask the Learning and Culture Committee that question.
Well,
if that's
yes,
okay.
I suppose so. I suppose
yes.
It does appear in the report before us tonight, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, if you want to ask that committee, that'd be lovely. But thank you anyway. Councillor Aviett and then Councillor Champion.
Thank you, Chair. Concerning the housing overspend, is it anything to do? Can I just ask? Is it anything to do with fly tipping? Because when there's fly tipping on housing land, we have to pay the cleansing department. And is it anything to do with tenants basically smashing up their properties? That's my two bugbears, and I think the people who are wrecking their council houses, and they are fly tipping as well. Is that coming out of this overspend, or is there something else? Thank you.
Would you know the answer to that, Matthew? Or
no, sorry, Councillor, my connection went slightly then. Sorry, could you just repeat it? Sorry.
Yeah, it's concerning the overspend on the housing. I know because
on building maintenance, or
no. Well, no. Is it because I've had lots of reports of people wrecking their council houses, and I know that some people have kicked their doors in 3 times in a month, right? And other thing is fly tipping. Is that where the overspend is? Because I can't see anything else. Sorry. Just going to ask you if you know where the overspend is there.
So within so the HRA budget is obviously ring fenced for housing, and that forms think that forms part of this report, but it's not within this committee's remit, I don't think, again. So building maintenance is, but the housing HRA budget isn't. But I think that's is housing within here. Yeah, so public sector housing, yeah, it's proposed. At the moment, that's projected on budget for the year. So I don't think they've got an issue at the moment. As you say, there is abuse within housing, and we do have to go in repeated times some properties. We do try and claim back when there has been abuse, or when someone's fled a property and left it in a state of disrepair. However, the collection rate on getting that money back is quite low. As you appreciate, it's quite hard to chase that debt. So yeah, and fly tipping. I suppose fly tipping would be picked up by whoever's land the fly tipping was on, whether it was housing land or highways, parks, etc. So that'll be causing issues all over the council, I think. But I think we are with enforcement. Obviously, we're making strides into trying to identify a lot of that fly tipping and raising obviously fining if we can find out who was fly tipped the waste, which again is difficult in some instances, but I think they are successful sometimes in identifying that waste. And the enforcement team is expanding and in those areas. So yeah, sorry, not a complete answer to your question, but okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Avett. Councillor Champion, if you want to ask your question.
I'm not sure which scrutiny committee the ICT would be under.
That'll be corporate resources.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. It's corporate performance.
It's all to do with corporate resources, is it?
Ah, yeah. Okay. So yes, you could ask that committee if that's okay, Councillor Champion.
Thanks
okay,
so much.
I can't see anybody else has got a question to ask you, Matthew. I think this one is just for noting as well. So thank you for those 3 reports, Matthew. We appreciate your time coming to talk to us. So we now are actually go into our last report. Matthew, if you've finished for the evening, you want to leave, you're welcome to leave the committee, but you can stay if you want to as well.
I might as well stay the distance.
Okay, all right, well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last report that we have is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q1 performance 22 to 23, and I believe, Emma, you're going to lead us on this report.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for waiting, Emma, so long.
It's been a long evening, and you'll all be glad to hear this is a relatively short presentation. I'm just trying, hopefully everybody can see that. I've just displayed the presentation. Brilliant.
Yes.
So the report before you this evening relates to the Q1 performance for this financial year, which is from the 1st of April 2022 to the 30th of June 2022. And you'll see from the report that you've got 3 appendices attached. Appendix A has got this presentation if you want to have a look at it in more detail, and appendices B and C provide more detailed and contextual information on the actions and performance indicators if you wish to have a look at those in due course. So I'm delighted to say that the overall status for the annual delivery plan is green, which is really good news. And this chart, this first screen does show you that. And this next slide here now just shows you what we've actually achieved against the 4 main objectives. So I'll just pick out a couple of these. If we look at neighbourhood services in terms of what we've done in terms of objective 1, which is to work with and for our communities, there it's mentioned that we've implemented an asset management scheme within our highway services, which will assist sustainability, carbon reduction, and if you take objective 2, which is support learning, employment and sustainable growth, here it's noted about how we've supported our leisure centres to recover from the effects of COVID-19, and other areas that we've improved, including a fantastic new outdoor facility at Barry Leisure Centre. In terms of objective 3, support people at home and in their community, there's reference there to some of the many active travel improvement schemes that we've got ongoing, including a really good route that we've just completed in St Athan. In terms of objective 4, respect and enhance and enjoy our environment, there's mention there of our green flag parks, and also mention there about the local nature partnership, which is another excellent example of how we support groups to deliver biodiversity projects across the Vale. So just moving on now to the performance snapshot, and I must admit, when I looked at this, I was really pleased, but it is just the first quarter. All the challenges that we've heard this evening in terms of budgets, capital revenue budgets and staffing pressures, we still manage here to just show one red, which I think, you know, for me as a head of service and hopefully you as a committee, you will think at the moment that is really good. That is really good show. So that one red is an action, and it's NSA008, which you'll find on Appendix 2. And it is to secure income from enforcement inspections and fleet sponsorship. Now, I'm delighted to say that our enforcement team is doing really well, and we're reinvesting any monies that are taken there into the highway where we can. Also, our inspections are really good in terms of highway inspections, but what we need to do more on is to look at whether there's opportunities for additional sponsorship, particularly for fleet moving forward. The market is really difficult at the moment. We've been very lucky to get some a bus shelter sponsorship, but there's still more work that we need to do within that area moving forward. So the final slide for you this evening is to give you an idea of where we need to look at future focus and improvement. And again, each of these boxes relates to the 4 objectives that I've mentioned earlier, and each one suggests ideas of how we can go forward. So for the first objective, there's a note there that we need to recruit more volunteers for the Green Links transport service to ensure the longevity of that service moving forward. As members will know, volunteer attraction and keeping volunteers is extremely difficult, but Green Links is one of those good examples of where we have managed to do that. In terms of objective 2, that there is a note here about how we need to improve the decarbonation of our school assets. And I know the leader mentioned earlier about the excellent programme that we've had in terms of 21st century schools, but there is also other work we need to do in terms of making it easier for people to walk to school and improving the air quality around school as best we're able to. And also getting the youngsters to actually understand what their, how they get to school, what happens and what those impacts are on the climate. In terms of objective 3, we've just mentioned, I mentioned there about the regionalisation of sports development. As I say, that's something that is being looked at, and there are a number of services being looked at possible regionalisation, but that's one of them, and we're obviously looking at a lot of work on that. And finally, one of my favourite, our waste that we collected. Our performance was slightly down this quarter, but not by much. We are pushing the boundaries at over 70%, and we are, second, or we were last year second in Wales in terms of our performance. And we've still got work to do there. There's still education we need to do there. And it was interesting earlier to hear the comments about the fly tipping, particularly in, fly tipping happens in all areas, but we do get fly tipping within council estate areas. And I know that is something that we have been looking at, trying to educate and promote use of recycling and explaining to residents where they can put their waste, because that's 9/10 of it, I think. So that's all I've got to say on this evening, but I'm more than happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. Does anybody want to ask Emma any questions? Councillor Aviett, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Emma, for that. Yeah, just on the obviously the recycling and stuff. I nearly took a photo of my 4-year-old grandchild. He lives with us and everything. My daughter and a grandchild, and he was put in the recycling, and he knows which bags they go in. And I am going to take a photo next time. I am going to take a photo and just put on my councillor Facebook page if a 4-year-old can do it. It's tedious. It's really tedious. Even if you've got these little pots of I don't know what the kids like sauces and stuff, and you've got to rinse them out and put them out. It's really tedious, but it really helps. And I bought one of my neighbours. I don't even drive, but I went down the library and brought my neighbour all the recycling stuff that she could possibly want, and she's still not doing it. Still not doing it. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether I should just go across the road and say, this goes in this and this goes in this and whatever. But my 4-year-old, grandson is being brought up now to do it, and he enjoys doing it. I think it's not about naming and shaming. I think it's about education. And it is a pain. It is a pain, but we got to do it. And yeah, I just think it's education. Sorry, that's what I've got to say. Sorry, thank you.
No, and it sounds excellent, and I'd love to see any pictures you can provide of your 4-year-old actually doing that, because that we need to be teaching from the from the younger stage, so that carries through with those children moving forward. I mean, in terms of we do have waste wardens that we've got out, particularly in some of the Barry areas at the moment, to try and help people to learn to recycle, to show them where things need to go. And we've got videos, etc., and we've got resource. But if there is anybody in particular, you can always put them to our waste team, and we can send somebody out just to offer that little bit of advice, that little bit of help of what they can recycle, what needs to go in their black bag. And of course, we do have a scheme if people are really still struggling. There is a scheme where they can have an additional purple bag. So there is all that advice and assistance offered. We are here to help. We appreciate the work that the Vale community have been doing in terms of recycling, and we just want to take that forward.
Chair, can I just come back with something else? Chair, can I just come back
briefly? Briefly.
Yeah, briefly. But like from the pages we have on on social media, people say we're paying enough and everything, and why should we do it? And you've probably heard it yourself. I'll probably email you another day and ask you how we can get around that, because people say, oh, we're paying enough in council tax, and council should be doing this and council should be doing that. So I'll talk to you about that another day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Champion, if you'd like to ask your question, and then I've got a question as well, Emma.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned about trying to educate children not to drive to school. I don't know how you're in Cowbridge, our sixth formers, and I know it's a rural school and the catchment's quite large, but we have a large number of sixth formers who actually drive to school.
Yeah, I can come back on that. I just had a sixth former leave Cowbridge, so I understand the issues. If they're within catchment, they are entitled to a free bus still in terms of post-16 transport, but understandably a lot of sixth formers, once they can drive, they want to use their car. Cowbridge in particular has got restricted parking, and we've obviously put some charges within the town and some residential permit areas as well within the town, which has discouraged some driving. But I'm afraid I don't have any solutions to stop sixth formers getting in their cars, but except to restrict the parking that is available in the area. That makes them think twice then, is it easier to get to the bus if they're going to have to pay for their their parking space, or if it's going to be difficult. But yeah, it's a common problem with sixth formers.
Thank you, Emma. Mine's about walking to school as well, and I just wondered whether a piece of work had been done about the distance that children are actually being driven from their homes to actually school, and is it a really short distance that they're being driven there, or is it a necessity, if you like, that the buses might not be as yet available for people? I mean, the other morning it took me 20 minutes to get out of Barry, because every route I took was on a school route, and the amount of traffic I hadn't, because I don't have to do it every day, so it was an enlightening experience. But I just wondered if we managed to do that type of work, and how we go about encouraging children to think about that and walking to school, and getting parents to think it's okay, we can let the children walk to school as well.
I think you've got to win the children over to win the parents over, especially if it's on a wet morning.
Yes.
Obviously, if the parents choose catchment schools, we provide free transport into with the legislation to those catchment schools. So that's 2 miles for primary and 3 miles for comprehensive. But within the Barry area, a number of people aren't obviously entitled to that, if that's where you saw the traffic congestion. So what we try to do is we try to make safer walking and cycling routes. A good example of that is the route on Port Road, and I do see the children using it, quite frequently, walking, cycling and scooting. So that's good. So those are other measures that you can put in to enable the shorter distances, so the less than 3 miles, the less than 2 miles, to be encouraged. But what you do tend to find is you go around the school gate in a primary school in a village, and the majority of the people that are there, unfortunately, are often people that live within that village and could easily walk. So you can put the routes in, you can do the encouragement, but at the end of the day, I think it's almost for the children to go home to the parents, say, actually, Mum, I want to walk to school, or I want to cycle to school, and that's the hearts and minds really that we need to take forward. But we've got lots of schemes we're doing outside school. We also have to do a lot of enforcement with our camera car, on foot, unfortunately, because you do get parents parking outside schools, which is extremely dangerous, and we have to have that. So it's a combination of methods, I suppose. We also encourage schools to do travel plans to see how their children are getting to school, and to see whether there are other solutions to them getting to school, because at the end of the day, quite often walking to school is the free option. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to get in the car. And sometimes, as you probably say, if it's really busy, it's probably quicker.
Yes. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. And like you say, it's hearts and minds, and the children, I suppose, as they get older, they probably want to walk to school with their friends rather than sometimes. Yes. But thank you very much.
If it's not raining, if it's raining, they don't want to. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much for this report. I think it's for quarter one, that's really good results for this as well. You know, it's just the one sort of red, and that's you know, sort of a reasonable you know, reasonable red, if you like. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for bringing this report. So I think, is this report just for us to note as well?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, I was on mute. So this is just for us to note, but yes, thank you very much for bringing the report and stuff. And thank you everybody for contributing to tonight's meeting. That's concluded our meeting for this evening. There's nothing in that I've considered urgent, and there's nothing in part 2. So thank you very much everybody for contributing and asking your questions. If there's questions that you need to ask of other scrutiny committees, I would recommend that you do that to find out the answers you want. And yeah, thank you for starting at 5. I think we've done really well. We finished before 7:45, so thank you very much. And I'll see you at the next committee meeting, which is on, sorry, I'm just looking now. Bear with me one moment. Do we know when the next committee meeting is, Gareth? Sorry, I can't find it on my agenda.
16th of November.
16th of November. So I'll see you on the 16th of November, and thank you very much, everybody. All right, good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair.